Hey now, today we're going to take a look at Shadows of Malice from Devious Weasel Games. This is a cooperative game where the players are taking control of powerful warriors known as Avatars of Light, and they are trying to stop the evil shadow god Zulthul from arising again and destroying the world, or plunging it into Shadows of Malice, I guess. And by the way, that's Zulthul, not Zul. I believe that the Ghostbusters took care of that evil god. So you go around the map with all these different avatars. The game goes from 2 to 8 players, although you can play it solo easily enough. And you just try to power up and take out powerful monsters that have been corrupted by the shadow god, take care of the actual minions of the shadow god, because you both have the same goal. Both the players in the shadows are trying to uncover these light wells that these old ancient guardians are protecting, so you're going to have to defeat them first. But the shadows want to find the one light well amongst all the dark wells and corrupt it and then give rise to Zulthul, whereas the players want to uncover the light well and just bring light to the world and banish Zulthul forever. So let's go ahead and take a brief look at how the game is played, and I'm really going to make it brief this time because there's a lot of little details to this game that I just don't want to go over. I just want to give you a broad overview of what the game is like. Then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Alright, I'm going to give you a very brief rundown of Shadows of Malice. I really am not going to cover every single detail of this game. There's a lot of little tricky bits to the rules that I'm just not willing to go over. I'll probably get them wrong anyways without constantly referring to the rulebook. So I'm just going to give you a general overview of what you're trying to do here. The theme is that each of the players take control of these avatars of light who are trying to prevent the rise of this dark shadow god named Zulthul. And the goal here is for the players working cooperatively, this is a cooperative game, to uncover these light wells. The light wells start off as strongholds, and there's going to be one light well mixed in amongst all these shadow wells. And by the way, there's multiple map tiles you can use for this game, depending on the number of players and how long you want the game to go. Actually, it's really just dependent on how long you want the game to go. You can play one map tile with as many players as you want. The game goes up to 6. But if you want the game to be longer, be more in-depth, you can use more map tiles that are similar to this one. You combine them with the map. I'm just using one to keep it simple for right now. So you'll have these light well tokens that are mixed in on this map. One of them will be light, the other ones will be dark for each different map. So the more maps you have, the more light wells you're going to have to try to uncover. And that's the goal, is to uncover these light wells and therefore win the game. Now, the game itself is playing against you, and the shadows from the shadow realm, that's what this board is over here, are going to be trying to bust into the real world, the light realm, and find the light well and corrupt it, and therefore bring out Zulthul, the shadow god. Now here is the impressive looking shadow pieces, aren't you scared? And here's Zulthul, who looks completely different. Doesn't look like a shadow at all. And here are your avatar pieces, which look like crystalline eye people. Okay, just bear with me. So you'll start on the gate here, and there actually won't be a shadow right away, but every turn is going to be, every round of the game, excuse me, is going to be the hero's turns, the avatar's turns, and then it's going to be the shadow's turn. So the first turn, if there's no shadow there, you'll spawn a shadow. Then the shadow is going to be randomly moving around, trying to get to these sealed gates, and trying to pop open these gates in order to get into the real world. Now back to the heroes. On the heroes' turns, their goal is to try to go around the map, take out different threats, all these represented by these different monster tokens that have been corrupted by the Shadow Lord. And you're also going to try to go to get the help of these mystics. Now on the other side of these mystics tokens, there'll be different special effects that you may gain access to. And also the city tokens. Again, these are all going to be randomized, so you'll have a different random one each time. And they'll all give you a different special effect, like that one's healing wounds whenever you go to them. And so your job as the heroes to try and make the best use of these as you can. And you're going to try to take out these monsters in order to get more bonuses as well. You'll also start the game with a special mastery card. The mastery cards will be special abilities that you get and that will be particular to you as an avatar. And if you uncover the light well later, you may be able to attune yourself and get better masteries. Now this says that as a defender, you get combat defender. It's -1 to the D star. Now, this is part of the confusing part of the rules of the game. D star really means that you roll a die and try to get like a 50-50 chance of adding a 0 or a 1 to a defender's roll. And in this case, combat defender, you're essentially decreasing your opponent's combat value. And then the bottom part of all these cards is if you spend one of these magical soul shards of the appropriate color, then in this case it was blue, so you'd have to spend one of the blue soul shards. Then you'll get that extra ability if you want to use a soul shard for that. But yeah, this D-star thing is kind of a weird thing the game uses. You can also, it says that you can use a coin flip if you want to illustrate that. Then another example of this, you have Lifesaver, which is just if you use a soul shard, you're going to be able to get +2 to your wounds healed. This Gatecaster card is going to let you use the gates, which are the star symbols around to travel around the board, and so on. So you'll have your special abilities, and you'll run around the board trying to kill monsters. Now, the way the monsters work is also down to random dice rolls as well. So you'll have this creature generator, and what you're going to do is you're going to look at where you actually are on the map. So there's different types of terrains. There's, here, I'll focus in on that as a matter of fact. So out there on the map, you have different types of terrain. Like you have water, you have forests and land and mountains and rough terrain and roads, all these different things. You'll refer to the creature generator when you, as soon as anyone stops on one of these monster tokens, you'll refer to the creature generator and see what type of terrain that you're on. Then you're going to roll a die, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 to see what type of creature it is. So if you're on the plains and you roll a 1, 2, 3, they're avian. If you're in the wilds and you roll a 4 or 5, it's a protean, whatever that is. And then you're going to go to the next chart, and you're going to see the creature power. So roll another d6, and it'll tell you how much power they add to their dice rolls, and how much they get to their combat rolls, and how many wounds they deal, and how many life tokens they get. And then once you figure that out, then you go to their creature abilities. And depending on how you roll, you might have to roll an ability card. And I'll show you those. Here's the ability cards. These will be special abilities that influence the creature. So Displace. This creature is able to subtly shift its position in time and space so that its opponents misjudge its true whereabouts. So it might add penalties to your dice, or it might increase its ability to shrug off wounds. Or let's see, another example. Impervious. The creature's physical form is hardened and armored and extremely resistant to damage from physical and energy sources. So +2 D, again, star, which is essentially just rolling 50-50 or flipping a coin. So anyways, so that's what might happen when you encounter a monster. If you defeat the monster, you're able to take its life essence as soul shards, and you might also get treasure and different things as well, which is really going to help you out. The treasure cards will give you special bonuses when you're trying to take out different monsters, or eventually take out the Guardians of the Well. So the Book of Radiance is going to let you destroy the shadow in the Shadow Realm and seal XD star, oh boy, Shadow Gates, where X is the number of life tokens the shadow possessed. Because the shadows have their own life tokens, you have to try and take them out the same way you take out the monsters, and so on. So that's a general idea of what you're trying to do in the game. Trying to run around the board, take care of threats, to power yourself up, get soul shards, get treasure, because the Guardians are really, really tough. And now, when the shadows of the Guardian, or the avatars, are able to uncover the wells, if the shadow is able to uncover the light well when he gets back into the normal realm by uncovering the gates in the shadow realm, he may turn into Zulthul, and then you're in a world of hurt, because Zulthul is incredibly difficult to take out. By the way, I didn't even explain how normal movement works, or what the players do on their turn. On the player's turn, they're going to roll 2 dice, and one of the die you'll assign, I don't know why you do it at the same time, but one die you assign as movement, let's say the white die, the other die you assign, that's the wrong die, sorry, from another game. One die you assign as a fate die. So if I rolled this, I get 6 movement points +2, which you always get. Then if you roll this, if you were to get a double on both of these dice, you draw a fate card, which is another type of card in the game. Fate cards can be good things, like revealing a path, which helps your, let me focus in there, which might help your movement along. Or Kiss of the Divine, which gives you more wounds back, or traps and instants, which you're forced to play right away, like curses and things like that. Other types of cards, you have different types of potions you may get using the Mystic or City Spaces, or killing some monsters. That's really the game. I could go into more detail, but that's essentially it. You're running around the map trying to take out these monsters, to get stronger, in order for you to eventually fight the really powerful Guardians of the Wells, in order to uncover the Light Wells, or multiple Light Wells if you have multiple map tiles, and to defeat the Shadows, or potentially defeat Zolthul if you really have to, but you don't want it to get to that because Zolthul is going to try, by that point, all you need to do is get to the Light Well and corrupt it permanently to make everyone lose the game. That's a very, very quick run-through of Shadows of Malice. Now, there was a lot of potential here with Shadows of Malice. I like the art style of the cover, and it kind of led me to think, wow, this could be a very interesting, different take. It's not going to be your typical fantasy-style artwork, and the theme, it was a little bit different. I mean, this is your typical fantasy theme of getting together a crew of heroes and going and trying to stop this dark, evil god from awakening. That's nothing new, but I thought it was coming at it from an interesting angle, finding these light wells where these guardians were. So on paper, it all sounded pretty good. In practice, opening up the box, looking at all of the components, and then trying to play the game, I felt like I was at work. Like the most dull, boring part of my job. That's what this game is. It is an exercise in rolling dice, adding numbers in a very obtuse and weird way, and just trying to make successful rolls and favorable outcomes with no tie to the theme whatsoever. This is what you call a spreadsheet game. Starting back from the beginning, the components are awful. It's very strange because I feel like this game was probably expensive to produce. I mean, the cardboard is, good, thick, heavy cardboard. The cardstock quality is good. He had to pay someone for artwork unless he did it on his own, the designer of the game, or then the publisher of the game, who I think are the same, one and the same. And also there's like all these gems that I've seen in like every game since Ascension at this point. And so in lots of dice. So I feel like this game was probably expensive to produce, but you really don't have anything to show for it because it looks bland, generic, and boring. The hero tokens are like these little crystalline eye tokens that you could have mistaken for, oh, if I move here, I get a gem? Oh no, that's me, I'm the character. The shadow things are okay, but then the dark god Zolthul awakens, and he's just a different colored shadow token. The monster tokens are just these little paw prints, and the city is just a sea. I mean, even the map itself, I mean, like the actual board with the river and the mountains and the terrain, looks like the most generic thing you've ever seen from like a Hex Encounter war game. And I'm wondering if that's what's going on here, if the publisher and designer perhaps was into war games and that's why everything looks so generic and bland. I don't know, but it's an eyesore. I know that some people like this minimalist style. It does not work for this, and it totally takes me out of the theme. Components matter, they do. Not every game has to have fancy miniatures, but something, standees with some artwork, just make it look good, because it's totally failing compared to all these other types of games with a similar type of theme and feel to them, like Legends of Andor or Descent. It doesn't even compare as far as art style goes. I know not everyone has the budget for that, but geez, find someone on DeviantArt, something. I mean, it just does not work for this game. The chief offender here, aside from the gameplay itself, is the rulebook. The rulebook is horrendous. It is one of the worst rulebooks I have ever read. Nothing is laid out in a concise and easy way. That's probably why when I was sent the game, I was also sent along 5 extra pages of printed out facts, frequently asked questions to go along with the rulebook. And in there, in those frequently asked questions pages, it actually spells out very, very basic things that are just not covered or are not laid out in a convenient way in the base rulebook. Like, how do you take your turn? What are the order that you take actions? What can you actually do on your turn? When does the shadow turn happen? This is pretty basic stuff that I actually need to play the game, and you have to pore through the rulebook just to get to that. There's no good table reference or glossary in the book. Every important information for one particular thing, like how to fight monsters, is split up into different sections, and oh man, it is so clunky. And again, this makes me feel like maybe the designer also was into war games, because I've read some war game books that have like weird, it's very odd how the rules are laid out. That's the same feeling I'm getting here, and it is just a chore to sift through. Everything about this game was a chore.
Getting onto the gameplay. So once you actually get through the rule book, and it turns out that the rules themselves, as long as you can understand them properly, are not that complicated. This is just roll some dice to see how much movement you have. It's not a roll and move. I mean, you get to determine how you spend your movement points. Go to a spot and see what happens. You might fight a monster. You might interact with a city or a mystic space. You might interact with the Guardians or fight them if you have to, or the Shadows. So that's pretty basic, but then it gets needlessly complicated. First off, the game uses this system, this D-star system. And you see that and you're like, wow, what does that even mean? And oh, look at these charts with all these dice. What does this mean? All it means is doing a 50-50 to see if you get a 0 or 1 bonus or whatever the card is modifying. That's it. The book even says, you can just use coins for this too. We give you these little tokens you can flip as coin flips. Why? That is so... It doesn't make any sense. Why not just have +1, or why don't you have +1 bonus tokens? Like, or just modifiers. Why? It's so weird. It's just weird. Or custom dice. You know, that would have been a workaround for this too, like Descents. Just have some custom dice with different symbols. If the star symbol comes up, you get a bonus. If not, you don't. But now it's like, again, this isn't very complicated. And once you figure it out, you're like, oh, okay, that's what that means. But it's another added layer of, to the game. And then things like fighting monsters. Now that's a part of the game, again, that could have been very, very cool. You fight a monster. These are monsters who have been like corrupted by shadow, so they're all a little bit different. They all have different skill sets and things like that. You draw these ability cards, you're like, oh, that's kind of neat. But first, you have to roll a die, depending on the terrain that you're at, see what kind of creature it is. Then you roll another die and see what their power level is, what their health is, what all these different stats are. Then you roll another die and see if they get abilities or not. Then you draw the ability cards if they get them, and that modifies them, and that gives them different special abilities. And then you go into combat, which after all that needless complexity of figuring out what the monster is, you just roll die, see who has a higher number. That's it. And just rinse and repeat over and over and over again until one of you is dead or you withdraw. That's it. That's combat. It is so dull and pointless. I don't even think I went over it in overview because it was just, it didn't matter. It's just rolling to see who gets the higher number. After all that of figuring out what this monster was, why not just have a stack of monster cards with the stats there, flip a card over, fight it? I'm not saying that'd be good, that'd be really boring, but at least it would be easier to use. Have a stack of cards for every type of terrain and draw a random monster out of it. I know that's work, like it's actually work to do that and to have different stacks of cards, but that's what making a board game is. It's work, it's hard work, it takes time and effort. Having these different charts, it might seem like he put a lot of effort into it. To me, that's lazy. To me, that is making the player work when the player is supposed to be having fun. This is why I call this a spreadsheet game. Things like this, things like the obtuse dice rolling and figuring out what all the mastery cards mean. That's the other thing. There's just so much needless waste in this game. It could have been so much more streamlined, and it just felt like I was doing my taxes the whole time. You know, a little bit easier than doing my taxes, but not much. The game is anticlimactic, fighting the Guardians. I mean, you're just running around the map trying desperately to get as many soul shards and treasure as you can, because otherwise you're just going to get totally whipped by the monsters. That's the other thing, is that the game is very, very unbalanced. You might fight a monster, and you have to fight monsters. That's the only way you're going to get stronger. So you might fight a monster at the beginning of the game, and it just totally destroys you. But you don't have a choice. You have to. You can go to the city, you can go to the Mystic, and get some random whatever, potion or whatever it might be. But that's not really going to help you. You need to go and fight monsters, and you might just get destroyed. And you need to do this for so long before you have any shot of taking out the Guardians. And it might not matter, because the randomly moving shadow might eventually break out of the Shadow Realm, get to the real world, and bust open the Light Well. And then you're fighting Zolthul, and then you've lost. I don't know. There's really nothing that fun about this game at all. I like the idea of the theme. There were some cool things going on. I like the concept of the Shadow Realm and the monsters coming out and trying to get to the Light Well. None of it works very well. It's just not fun to play. A good idea does not a game make, and this feels like... It feels like someone who never played any fantasy board game of the last 10 years. That's pretty much what it feels like, and it definitely does not feel like... It feels like this was a number cruncher from the beginning, like taking all of just the rules from an RPG and stripping out all of the theme and the fun and the interaction involved with it. this was just a day at the office.